Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining this Digital Nordic Benelux FP&A Circle, where today we will discuss myth and misconception of rolling forecast and scenario planning. My name is Hans Gobin. I am International FP&A and FP&A Trends Ambassador, and today I'll be facilitating this meeting. Just in terms of stats, I would like to share with you that we have almost 300 people joining us from 39 countries, but mostly from the Nordics. So let's move on and look at what we've got on the agenda for you today. So today we'll look at rolling forecast scenario planning, of course, the modern FP&A framework and balance approach. We'll then look at a rolling forecast in particular, the key success factors. We'll then look at scenario planning, consideration and application. We have a case study after that to follow that will look into best practice scenario planning. Of course, we will look at the importance of process and technology as far as those two key rolling forecast and scenario planning is concerned. We will do conclusions and recommendation. And finally, we have a very exciting Q&A session at the end. So please, we're in for an hour and 30 minutes. Do stay with us for the whole session. Good time now to introduce to you my speakers, or panelists. So panelists, if you can join me on the webcam, please, and go off mute whilst I introduce you. Our first panelist today is Anfisa Hayes, EMEA CFO at Honeywell Process. She's based in Raleigh, Switzerland, where she's joining us from. And today she'll share with us her experience on rolling forecasts and the key success factors. Anfisa, great to have you with us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hans, and hello to everyone. Wonderful to see you on this webinar.
Thank you very much, Anfisa. Moving on, our second panelist is Wojciech Perebski, who is VP Finance at Hitachi Energy, based in Zurich, Switzerland again, where he's joining us from. And today he'll take us through considerations and application, especially for scenario planning. Wojciech, great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Hans. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to the session.
Thank you. Whoops, I've missed Kajetan there. Sorry, Kajetan. Our third panelist is Kajetan Lubina, Senior Finance Director at CommScope, joining us from Flanders in Belgium. And today he will share with us his case study and how he does scenario planning. Kajetan, great to have you with us.
Hello, thank you for the invite. Great to be here with you.
Thank you. And finally, we have Tuvi Mai, who is Head of Strategic Finance with Pigment. She's based in Paris, France. And today she will share with us how important technology is and processes within both of these rolling forecasts and scenario planning. Tuvi, great to have you with us today.
Hans, thank you for having me. Very much looking forward to this discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got four panelists, extremely interesting sets of slides and presentation to come from them. Lots of insight coming for you. Panelists, what I would say now is if you can switch your webcam off, I will take the members through some housing. So let me introduce to you guys our technology sponsor for today. They are Pigment. We all know Pigment. They are a business planning platform, especially for fast-growing companies. So thank you, Pigment, for being our sponsor. Just a very quick one on FP&A Trends Group. You can see our international FP&A board is now in 29 countries. Last two chapters was Austin and Miami. We continue to grow. We continue to carry on FP&A education through all of our resources online, workshop, project, ebook series, and also the FP&A Trends Digest. And finally, we also do strategic advisory and research consultancy, AI, ML, FP&A community. Our surveys and research is a big thing as well. We will share with you some of those during the session. For those who have joined us for the first time, let me remind you, it's a 90 minutes webinar. We have you participating via 4 polling questions, so please vote when I release the polling questions. You can ask questions via the chat box. You can ask now if you've got any questions on the related subject or after each presentation, but please direct it to which speaker you want it answered. Please network with us directly via LinkedIn. The presentation is available for you to download right now in handouts, or if you don't, you will get a copy and the recording link within 2 or so days after the meeting. When I close the meeting, there's a survey session, 30 seconds or so it takes to do. So please give us, how well we did, but also tell us what subject matter you would like to hear from us after. So please do that. Let me introduce to you the subject for today. So a bit of key concept and definition. And I think a good way to start is probably by looking at, again, this is from our survey, how long does it actually take to produce a forecast? Of course, you've got green at the bottom, so let's look at the green. 5%, less than a day, fantastic. 16%, 1 to 2 days, not too bad. 21%, 3 to 4 days. So that's about 42% taking a week to do a forecast. Now, if you look from the top, 2%, they didn't really answer. But if you look, it takes, the remainder 40-odd% between a month or more than a month to do a forecast. So, it's not efficient, it's not flexible, it's not dynamic at all. Now, if we look at what our trend, FP&A trend survey says on scenario planning, good news, 6%, real time at the touch of a button, 13% less than a day, 32% take less than a week. So not bad if you add all of these up. So what, nearly 50% take less than a week. But then look at 26% can't run scenarios or don't run scenarios, and the other 23% still struggling, and it takes more than a week to run. Not flexible, not adaptable, and maybe the result of the scenario is too late for us to do anything about. So that's something very interesting to look at. Quickly, rolling forecast, an example. So you've got a 5 quarterly rolling forecast. I don't need to take you through more detail here. You have your first review, which is 5 quarters, second review with 1 quarter actual, and then the next 5 quarter is what we're forecasting. But more importantly, it's not just about doing rolling forecasts. It's about, if you look at the advanced stage on the maturity model, is it driver-based? There's only one forecasting model, which is the rolling forecast. It has to have a balanced level of detail, high collaboration, advanced analytic, automated, very, very important, and a flexible system, which is integrated and agile. So have a good read of this in your own time. Finally, we're talking about scenario planning, scenario management. So again, you would see there are 2 different processes, which uses a rolling planning cycle or a rolling forecast. Integrated model, driver-based forecast, modeling driven by constant driver evaluation. Typically you want to be able to do it within 1 to 3 hours. And the great thing is you should be able to play multiple scenarios, not just one. I will skip through the last 2 slides, so please take your time and read through it in your own time when you get it. It is now a great time for me to introduce our first speaker, which is Anfisa Hayes, EMEA CFO at Honeywell Process, and today she will take us through the key success factors of rolling forecasts. Anfisa, over to you whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Hans. Wonderful. So let me start with a short overview of traditional versus rolling forecast differences. And let me remind about a poll that was done in 2015-16 by KPMG and ACCA. So at that point in time, 62% of participants said that they're using a static forecast, which is a point in time, a snapshot preparation of annual length duration, and that was not including the updated assumptions. Okay. And to relate to one of my very first budget experience, some of the companies spent a lot of time on preparing the annual budget. They spent 2 to 3 months on aligning the targets, bottom to top, top to bottom, different assumptions, communication, and then finally the budget is published. However, it is put away somewhere in the virtual folder, and then 3 months down the line, the budget analyst or the finance planning manager is called on to explain what is happening with the business, while the actuals are so much different versus the forecast, and there are thousands of numbers and assumptions behind to explain and to track, and that can become really frustrating, right? So the traditional or static or annual budget, as we say, is basically historically database, and it is using fixed targets and measures, right? And we all have faced a situation, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, where the change in economic conditions really kick off the ground all your basic work and assumptions, right? There are supply shocks, there is a rapid increase in demand, there could be change in tariffs, we have Brexit, and then all your budget is basically upside down. So the static budgets are less and less relevant, and a lot of companies are moving to rolling dynamic budgets that are live, updated on a specific set of drivers, and also extremely important, tailor-made to make to success in your company. Because we are all different companies, we are running different businesses. There could be short cycle to long cycle. There could be startups at the beginning with a very high growth perspectives, or stable businesses. So the rolling and or dynamic forecast is actually the key and most successful best practice, which is, if used properly, can really ensure the great success in your company. And if you are ready to roll out the rolling forecast, sorry for the pen, what are the key drivers that will enable you to do so? So number one, next slide. Yeah, we are talking about key drivers. And again, depending on the company, on the industry, these key drivers could be very, very different. If we are talking about beauty products or luxury product sale, right, the GDP could be one of the key factors. If we are talking about selling diapers or car seats for children, right, then the fertility rate, birth rates is one of the key factors. If we are talking about industrial production, project business or product running business, we are talking about aluminum, steel, other different commodities. Or if I work on the budget in the food company, food industry, then it could be palm oil, citric acid, and so on and so forth, the other commodities. What is absolutely crucial is to make sure that you are not taking into account too many drivers. They're really key. On the other hand, there is no optimal recommendation. It could be 5 to 10 or 20 to 25. It really, really, really depends on which business you're running. And it's better to select those that are helping you to shape the business decisions and that help you to guide your management, your executive board on what are the key decision makers, right? The forecasting period is the second most important component, and it really depends on the industry and on the pace of change in your organization. So the common recommendation, common advice is that the more dynamic your industry is, and the more changes you experience in commodities pricing, for example, the more frequently your forecast should be updated, and the shorter is the forecasting period, right? So in a fast-paced environment, it's very difficult to imagine that you would have 18 months rolling forecast updated monthly with a high degree of accuracy. And then we are talking about scenario planning, because with such a long horizon, you definitely need to present to your management best case, worst case, the most probable scenario. And yeah, we'll have a separate session, as Hans said, about scenario planning that Wojtek will present for you. But again, the more dynamic is your business, the more frequent is the update of your dynamic drivers, and the shorter the horizon is. One very interesting example from my history that I can tell you, both static and rolling forecast can actually coexist together. So you can have a quarterly target, which is an absolute end in mind to keep as a guidance. And then, due to the very dynamic nature of supply situation, of materials prices, or of other resources constraints, you want to have an absolutely great update for your management, and you can have quarterly forecast updated bi-weekly or even weekly if the situation requires so, and be presented to your management. Whenever we are talking about the forecasting period and frequency of update and scenarios planning for the rolling forecast, it's absolutely important to keep in mind the scenarios, right? And how you shape your scenarios. You shape them based on the risks and opportunities, because there are risks and opportunities that can be depending on driving your revenue or reducing your costs, or there are external supply shocks that could cause interruption to your production, and so on and so forth, right? So we'll have more later today to talk about it, but that's an essential part of how you can shape your rolling forecast base. Another important factor is multiple sources of data. I already mentioned to you that there could be external sources of data in terms of the GDP, commodities, market pricing. There could be internal sources of data, including the headcount, the production limitation or production growth plan. And it is extremely important to intertwine everything together and make sure that these multiple sources of data ideally are automated and are integrated in the model. And we'll be having another specific deep dive on potential technical solutions and modeling later on during the meeting. Last but not the least, introducing the rolling forecast takes time and effort. And if you're thinking about introducing it, then ideally you should ponder if it's possible to make it for one department or one function or one country or one region to test your waters, and then keep going and roll it out for the whole organization. So what are the building blocks of a rolling forecast? And there are 4 major blocks. Let's run through them really quickly. As mentioned, system automation modeling. You want your forecast to be updated in ideally 1 to 3 days, or sometimes even minutes, depending on the business and the stage of the business. The quality of the data is absolutely essential. Garbage in, garbage out. We all know this reference. So, as I mentioned, various sources of data, semi-automated or automated feed of your data and assumptions, and all of that should combine together in the proper culture in your company. As Hans mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, collaboration, alignment are vital, absolutely vital to make rolling forecast a success. And who are the enablers, the implementers of this process? These are, of course, the finance professionals, finance talents, who have to have a relevant expertise. So ideally, you can search in the market and buy someone, because the person with the right skills, or a team of people with the right skills, are the ones that will drive the value-added analytics that will enable the proper executive level decision making. They will build your scenarios. They will give you amazing key metrics to make proper business decisions in our fast-pacing world. Thank you.
Anfisa, thank you very much. Great presentation. Lots and lots of tips and tricks around rolling forecast. You know, a couple of things that stuck with me was, you know, it has to be dynamic, you know, driver base, very, very important. And, you know, how do you go about choosing your drivers as well? And of course, you left us with this page where there's quite a few tips as well. So thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. What I'm now going to do is ask our audience on this polling question. So please vote. How are they doing their forecasting at the moment? So what is the best description of your current forecasting process? First option is we do not do any planning or forecasting. Second is we rely on traditional budgeting methods only. Third is we use both traditional budgeting and rolling forecasts. And then fourth, we just use rolling forecasts. We don't use any budgets at all. And there are some companies that have given up budgeting completely because they use rolling forecasts. So if you can vote, please. What is the best description of your forecasting process? First, we do not do any planning forecasting. Second, we rely on traditional budgeting. Third, we use both traditional budgets and rolling forecasts. Fourth, we use just rolling forecasts. I'm now going to close the voting and share the results with our panelists. So 2% don't do any planning at all, 24% just budgeting, no forecasting, no rolling forecast, 56% use budget and rolling forecast, and 16% only use rolling forecast. Some good news in there. Anfisa, any comments from you?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's wonderful to see that more than half of today's audience is using traditional budget and rolling forecast combined. I think this is a winning hybrid combination. And bravo to those of you who already use just rolling forecast, because that's the most adapted to the dynamic change. Yeah, just one thing to re-highlight. If you imagine all the functions, sales, marketing, logistics, productions, all of them together providing inputs to your budget, then it's a boat, right? It's like a ship. You're all in the same boat, but your dynamic forecast modeling is the compass. This is what leads your business forward.
Absolutely right, Anfisa. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, it's great to see more than 50%. Well, almost 80% using you know, forecasting and budgeting. So great there. So let us come back, panelists. We've got a great question from Anfisa to yourself. So Anfisa, please do join us as well. So we've seen Anfisa's rolling forecast journey, the tips and tricks. Let us find out now what challenges the other panelists are facing within their rolling forecast or forecasting journey. So Wojciech, can I come to you first?
Yes, well, I'd say the first fundamental question is connecting also to the poll is the company willing to move completely to the rolling forecast and replacing the budget completely? But that's of course a fundamental change, because most of the companies are still used to do a traditional budget as some kind of, you know, anchor benchmark, setting the targets, even the evaluation for the purpose of the bonuses. So that's kind of a anchor which is difficult to lift when people want to move to the rolling forecast. Second thing, naturally, if that part is addressed one way or another, it's a matter of, you know, of implementation in the company, convincing the, you know, the stakeholders, and I believe also having the, you know, the right technology and the process, because the time horizon is changing every month or every quarter you move. The time horizon for that process is, of course, is moving. So it's a matter of adaptation, how we work with that.
Fantastic, a great answer there, and great point there in terms of whether or not some companies are ready to move away completely from budget. So let us go to Kajetan now. Kajetan, what will your feedback be on this?
Yes, I must say that I absolutely agree with Wojciech regarding his comments. And from my side, I think the main challenge in our organization will be really this switch to maintain a reasonable 12 months horizon. So in our business, which is relatively dynamic, without this annual, let's say, deep dive and preparation of strategic activities, which then are really key to make our budget, it's hard for us to say how will last 3 months in the rolling 12 look like. So we currently update forecast every month, but of course, the farther you go, the shorter your horizon becomes. We would somewhere in the second half of the year at least a quarter, if not 2, but that's because we are farther in the year. Also, planning discussions are starting, and we start to have a better insight into the new year. Without that, just like that, rolling 12 months, I think would be a major change and challenge for us.
No, fantastic answer there. Yeah, no, absolutely. It depends on the predictability span, as you say. Some businesses you can only predict, a month or 2 in advance, not 14, 15 months. So thank you. Tuivi, your answer, please.
Sure. So we do have a rolling forecast at Pigment, and the most difficult thing to juggle with is that we are a growing company with a lean structure, meaning that decisions are made very quickly. So things are changing a lot. There's no time to get bored, but we're a stage where models are being built, but also revised constantly. So I'm going to give you an example. We finalized our annual budget in December, and now 3 months into the new year, there might have been a new product line we wanted to test and launch, which means incorporating the model we've built and bridging all the numbers to have an overall storytelling that makes sense. And maybe that methodology will be changing again in a few months' time. So kind of like this forecasting model, that's the main thing we've been that is the most difficult for us today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Anfisa, any closing comments from you before we move to the next section?
Yeah, I would like to add 2 points. So we are all funds professionals. We all strive to a high accuracy, right? So for me, the rolling forecast model is something that should be able to deliver high forecast accuracy after a couple of runs, of course, probably not immediately. And in current environment with all the dynamic changes, I think short term, what I see as the biggest challenge is the risks that are coming on our tables are probably most asymmetrical. So we have more risks than we have opportunities short term, because opportunities take time to be developed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for answering the question and the insight. Let us now move to the next session where we are looking at scenario planning. So if we can turn our webcam and leave Wojciech to take us through his presentation, that will be fantastic. Again, introducing again Wojciech, VP Finance at Hitachi Energy, who will talk to us about scenario planning, consideration, and application. So over to you, Wojciech.
Thank you, Hans. Hi, everybody again. Maybe just a word about the company and the context in which industry it operates. Hitachi Energy operates in the power grids space. It has been transformed from ABB Power Grids and was acquired by Hitachi 2.5 years ago. And now it's part of the Hitachi Group as a standalone business. And as I said, to a large extent, it's a project business. Some of the project may last, up to a few years, and driven by the sustainability wave and the renewable sources of energy, where we provide equipment and solution. The business is actually in a growth mode, which of course brings the topic of the scenario planning even more relevant for us. On the next page, just maybe few definitions and a bit of a building blocks of the scenario planning. So as everybody can expect, the scenario planning is the financial process where we have multiple scenarios for the future. Typically, we might be looking at them as kind of a base scenario, worst case scenario, and the best case scenario. And then these scenarios are helping us to make actions, respond to the difficulties, and then address the opportunities. And then the key building blocks is definitely the identification of the key drivers that would drive the financial outcomes, assessment of the potential risk and opportunities, and addressing and developing the right strategies to achieve the goals and realize those opportunities and manage the risks. Then, of course, we need to have a range of those scenarios. So it's not just one answer, but a bit of a range from as I said, from the worst case scenario to best case scenario, with some midpoint which typically is taken to the forecast. And of course, these kind of a scenario planning or models that needs to be stress tested. So it's not only deploying and running with them, but also trying to understand how accurate these scenarios are. So it's not only looking forward, but also stress testing them backwards and looking how the reality happened versus the scenario, in order to change the drivers, change the variables, change the assumptions. On next page, basically you will see key success factors. We don't have to go through all of that, but clearly we need to have goals and objectives for every company, every business and industry will have their respective needs and nature. Some of the businesses are volume-based, volume-driven, so a lot of transactions, but individual transaction might be of low volume. There are some businesses, probably more like Hitachi Energy, where we have a larger, mid-size and large projects where individual transaction can have a significant influence on the financial performance. Then reliable data. So while the scenario planning is focused on the future, then of course we need to baseline ourselves in the historical financial performance. Some of the subjective and objective variables like economic data, market trends, FX rate, and so forth. Then assumptions and the variables, we need to define that clearly and document so it's understood. Then range of scenarios, I mentioned that, best case, worst case, most likely, or even other ranges of scenarios depending how we define that scenario planning model. Important piece is that the model and the process needs to be flexible, so need to be adaptable, and also needs to be efficient from timing perspective. Cannot be too complex. So inverted commas simple doesn't mean simplistic, but simple in a way that could be understandable. Because if there are too many complexities and too many variables, the sum of those components might be even contradicting each other in that model. And probably the last one, but probably the most important, is actually actionability. So the scenario planning is not to only expect the ranges, but effectively take actions that can help us achieve the financial but also strategic goals. Then if we move to the next page, a little bit of context before I go to some operational and practical applications of that scenario planning in Hitachi Energy. In the business that I operate, we are providing engineered solutions and products. Projects are typically 5 to 100 million, but sometimes even larger, and they last up to 3 to 4 years at the maximum. We apply percentage of completion revenue methodology. And then there are a few drivers which are extremely important for the financial performance: is the orders, revenues, and cash. But of course, orders, how they convert into revenues, this is one of the elements which are very, very important. That's why when we are looking in the scenario planning, the few things are very important. One is a very precise and very well understood planning of the orders, in terms of what is in the forecast, what is in the budget, what is in the backup, what is the timing, value, and the profitability on those orders. Then the next one, which is also very important, is the convertibility of those orders into the revenues, because depending on the nature of the project, the scope, and the duration, the speed of conversion to revenues will vary. And because of the size of the project, it can significantly impact the financial projections. Then, of course, documented assumptions in the forecast and also for the modeling, and then something which supports very strongly the assessment of those best and worst case scenario is the register of the risk and opportunities, which we are very closely monitoring and actioning on. And then the last piece there is how all of these assumptions convert to load assessment and the load charts. which basically means, how busy or underutilized our people may be, depending on those scenarios, and then we might be anticipating some of the actions, either in terms of increases in the headcount footprint, or opposite, depending on the outcome. So then, if we go to the practical elements, of course, it's not the intention to provide the instruction here, but just a few examples. What we are using, and actually what is also important. For orders, for example, we are using the system which probably most of you know and maybe even uses, the Salesforce. And one of the elements here, we also develop a lot of useful dashboards and reports that could be slice and dice in different format. We have these scenarios in terms of what is in the forecast, what is in the backup, what's the total pipeline. What is critical here is actually that's the point of the truth. So it's if we are using that, then of course everybody should be using that, and that point of truth is only there, nowhere else. That's orders. And then how these orders convert into revenue and cash in the convertibility model. So we have certain models for different types of projects in different industries, and then we can plug the assumed orders in the forecast into the model and calculate what would be revenue coming out of those orders. And then the risk and opportunities. So of course we document our assumptions, what goes into the forecast, and then we are managing specific risks and opportunities that helps us derive that range of the outcomes between the best case, worst case, and the base case. So it connects to a very important piece in the financial planning, which is avoidance of the surprises. And sometimes having good surprises or bad surprises might equally be detrimental to the forecasting or budgeting predictability. And the last piece, which I mentioned before, is the load chart. So effectively, it's conversion of the load coming from already projects that we have and execute, plus the new projects from the forecast. Excuse me. And then with that, we can plan where do we stand, by function, by the unit, by business. Where do we stand in terms of the requirements for the people in different disciplines? And with that, we can take certain HR-related actions, which of course have respective lead times. And then it's a cycle. We have a forecast, scenario planning, it's kind of feedback and loop itself, and then actions connected to that. And it's basically a running process. So then, if I conclude with some summary of that. Basically, the scenario planning and the deployed models and tools needs to be relevant and business specific. So each of you need to look at your specific business, what to deploy and how to deploy that. It needs to be fast and flexible, need to be relatively simple and understandable, needs to be aligned between participants, stakeholders, and management. And the last one, again, is the actionability. So all of this should drive action and not just information. And with that, basically, you can have some good baseline for the good scenario planning process and the system, and then improve from there and see how it works for you. Yeah, that's that. Thank you.
Wojciech, thank you very much. A great presentation. Lots of tips, tricks, consideration if you're going to run scenario planning, and finally, of course, much more importantly, you took us through how you run it yourself. Great example there. And the slide before that had a great thing which you mentioned, and I had one as well, that it's you start with your forecast, you run scenarios, and it is that circle. You update, you carry on, which is what people have got to realize. So thank you very much for that, Wojciech. Let us now go on to a polling question and look at what our members are doing as far as planning cycle is concerned. So here what we want to find out is, how long is your planning cycle? How long do you take to run this planning cycle? So if you can vote, please. So our first option there is we do not do any planning, as was before. The second one is longer than a month. The third one is longer than a week. And the fourth one is less than a week. So how long does it take you to run your planning? So we don't do any, first of all. Secondly, longer than a month, longer than 1 week, and less than a week. If you can vote, please. I will give it another second or so. Thank you for voting. I will close it and share the results now. So 2% don't do any planning, as we've seen before. 44% longer than a month, 35% longer than a week, and only 19% less than a week. Wojciech, what is your feedback on the outcome here?
Yeah, it's interesting insights. I think it's a bit also, number one is consistent. I mean, the 2% at the top is consistent with those who don't do the forecast. So that's good to see also from my finance experience, the consistency as well. Longer and then the month. That's surprising for me. Of course, depending how often do people do the forecast, but that would be, if we do the forecasting on a monthly basis, then it means that we are continuously in the forecasting process, never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
Longer, I would be hoping that we would be doing things kind of within the week, and hopefully longer than 1 week is not necessarily closer to the month. Yeah, I would be, let's say, trending that we should target with our processes to be more towards this bottom part, less than a week. So we can also add value and insights outside of the forecasting process. So the shorter the cycle is, in generally speaking, the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think looking at this, you can see that if it's longer than a week, then you're constantly running forecasts, especially if you are in that longer than a month sort of period. Let us now hide this and bring all of the panelists in and look at how many different scenarios do the panelists play within their forecasting and within their company. So do we have Anfisa? Anfisa, if you can attempt to answer the question first, please.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So best case, worst case, and most probable scenario definitely is the way we go. And as I mentioned, it's all based on risks and opportunities, which change sometimes daily. So that's why we are forecasting the range. And sometimes the risks are very asymmetrical, too many risks, not enough of the opportunities. And then we have separate brainstorming sessions, how to generate more opportunities and how to minimize the risks.
Thank you very much. Kajetan?
Yes, in our case, for really like monthly forecasting, I would say we will usually go with one scenario. However, we would have, before we go to senior management, with this version, we will have a lot of internal discussions estimating, as Anfisa said, the range in which we operate, the likelihood, and then trying to target the best, the most likely amount. So for sure, for the annual planning as well as any type of special projects, we would deal with at least 2-3 simulating market trends and so on. However, we have a little bit simplified process with a deep dive in the preparation to be as much accurate as we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Tuivi?
My answer would be at least 3. So worst case scenario, base case scenario, best case scenario. Then what happens is that you add more nuances to those because we want to see the medium-term impact. So we end up with a revised base scenario, a revised best case scenario, etc. But at the end of the day, what really matters is the range, as mentioned by Anfisa before, because there is no perfect scenario somehow. It's all about the guidance and be clear about the drivers in each scenario and key action plan to sort of activate to jump from one scenario to another.
Absolutely, it's how you resource it and which one you carry forward, and constantly reviewing and everything else. So panelists, thank you very much for your comment there. Let us now turn our webcam and move on to the next session. And this session is going to be by Kajetan Lubina, who is Senior Finance Director at CommScope. And today he will talk to us about his case study on scenario planning. So Kajetan, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, again. So I work at CommScope. We are a global company of around $8 billion turnover, 30,000 plus employees. And we design, manufacture, and sell wireline and wireless infrastructure to telecom operators, to the enterprise sector. So, for example, 4G signal in your phone, or maybe fiber in your home, that can come from CommScope. Today, I would like to share with you, yes, my observations regarding key drivers influencing our scenario planning, as well as a little bit of my vision for the future of scenario planning, providing current dynamic in the software area for finance. So starting with the drivers. Well, whether it's about regular forecasting, annual plan, long-range plan, or special projects, working on different scenarios certainly are one of our key elements to pay attention to, is the mix of our revenue. So being in a global company operating in different regions, selling to different customers, a broad range of products, depending on these assumptions, where do we grow, where do we know where we won't grow, and so on, our profitability changes a lot. So I have to say, we very rarely do any type of simulations where we would just stick to our average profitability, average margins we see for the business, without going at least one, if not two levels. On the cost side, being in a bigger multinational, we over time learned how important it is to understand which costs we can or cannot control. So there is a variety of costs in our company which are shared. These are different corporate costs. For example, shared IT services, different other type of HR, different other type of departments, on which our influence is really limited, and that plays a crucial role in case you, for example, take a given commitment regarding your future improvement on your costs or anything else. Well, if suddenly it turns out that 20 or 30% of your costs in a given P&L line is something out of your control, well, then the 10% target you took for the business suddenly becomes more challenging and needs to be dealt with within the remaining 70 you have under your control. So this is something we really pay attention to. I remember even one case in the past when we were looking into a business which didn't seem to be that profitable, but a more detailed analysis showed that it was carrying a really substantial amount of uncontrollable costs. Finally, totally not dependent from the business itself, and its kind of, let's say, true profitability wasn't that bad as we initially thought. Another element, very, very important, I think, in the manufacturing environment, fixed costs versus variable costs. There are of course certain areas of cost which are pretty obvious. Let's say fixed overhead in your standard cost, which they don't move normally with, let's say, with reasonable volume changes. But there are some other categories which we found out are sometimes more fixed than we thought. A good example here is warehousing costs, where you have a setup with warehouses somewhere externally with an external vendor who charges you depending on your volume and space occupied. And basically you think that it's all variable, but then a deep dive shows that within this cost there is a pretty substantial fixed monthly fee. So that can also change your simulations quite a bit. And then on the one-off cost investment side, well, the capex to invest, that's of course that's obvious, but there are different other operational one-off costs which we regularly make sure, talking to the business, that we include in the scenario planning, and they are not forgotten. A few good examples here in our case are, for example, transfer costs, external consulting, temporary for a given project, of course, severance costs or startup costs. We also tend to pay attention to, for example, our R&D resources. In case a given project consumes a fully loaded R&D department for a given activity, does this have any consequences to the delivery to the market of a new product, and then also consequences on the on our future revenues? So these are, for me, the key really elements we look at doing scenario planning in our company. Now, from the, say, a little bit operational side, how we do that? Well, of course, we gather information from different sources. Luckily for us, even if we don't use any type of AI, machine learning yet, but we are lucky to be globally on one ERP with consistent data, and that allows us to really automate some retrieves, whether through Oracle Cloud in Excel or some more details via business objects. But we have good quality data at our disposal, which then allows us to automate this part of the process and focus on the understanding, really interaction with the business, assessing the results, what Wojciech was also highlighting during his presentation, finally resulting in adjustments to the model, and the cycle closes. I think an interesting experience here from our side is that this particular work on a given scenario and problem often results in improved practices for monthly forecasting. One of the examples here would be freight in our case, providing what happened in the transportation cost area over, let's say, basically during COVID, yes, and currently as well. We spend a lot of time understanding the mechanism of our free costs and of our freight costs and what drives them, and that resulted in a model which we use currently every month to be more accurate regarding the expectations of freight costs, and which allows us also to validate corporate allocations of freight costs which go into our business. So we are now, let's say, kind of in this a little bit automated mode, especially on the data retrieve side of the things, followed then by a lot of our manual, let's call it, work on scenarios. Now, providing what's happening currently in the market in the software area for finance. If we move on to the next slide, I would like to share a few observations regarding opportunities I see for efficient scenario planning, leveraging a modern tool which maybe exists already in the market or will come to that extent. So how would if one day we were to switch to a more automated scenario planning tool, I've asked myself, well, what would this tool really be like? What would it need to have? And for sure, one of the characteristics here is data integration. So integration with ERP, possibility to upload some market data, maybe from the past, or the expectation for the future, something else. So this connection and data integration in a consistent way, allowing finally to create a consistent set of data, which can be then used in the simulation, followed by flexibility of the tool. So by flexibility of the tool, I mean having the influence on what the tool proposes in terms of scenario planning, to be able to adjust it to the business reality of a given company. So I'm thinking here about defining whether a given cost category is really fixed or variable, or to what extent. Can I introduce some ratios? can I basically make all this data and proposed initial input more adjusted to the reality of my business. Then, once we have that, well, the next stage, of course, is visualization. I'm thinking, well, in our case, I think we all know how important it is when you go to in front of the senior leadership team with your results, how important the presentation is. Yes, it has to be concise, it has to be relatively simple, give the right message. And we really spend a lot of time thinking about the best way to present this complex work which was made during the scenario planning process. If a tool was able, again, with some flexibility needed, of course, but convert these information scenarios into an initial visualization effort, highlighting key elements which are changing, influencing the model, I think that could be a huge help, which then after with some fine tuning could be used for the presentation to the management team. And finally, access controls. So the access, of course, in case of such a tool, it would be great so that it's used for a broad number of people, different groups, but sensitive data of course needs to be protected. So that would mean the necessity to have some groups for which we can manage security levels depending on the need. And finally, last one, which is not here, but which I would like to highlight, I think it would be great if such a tool could also give some indications on the sustainability really factor of what we are planning for. The sustainability starts to be more and more important, but it's often difficult to capture. And having something like that directly coming from the scenario planning tool, I think would be a great functionality for the future. Thank you very much.
Kajetan, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation, for taking us through, of course, your case study, but then also, telling us, what that ideal sort of scenario planning tool would be, and what are you guys working towards as well, which is fantastic to hear. Let us now look at what our members are doing in terms of scenario planning. So what is the best description for the scenario management process in your organization? So what we're trying to see here is how long does it take to run those scenarios within your own organization. So first option here is scenarios are run in real time. Scenarios are run in less than 1 day is the second option. Third option is we can run scenarios, but it is time consuming. And then the fourth option is we are unable to run scenarios. So please tell us how long it takes you to run your scenario. First option being real time at a touch of a button, really. Second is less than a day. Third is we do run scenarios, but it is very time consuming. And then fourth is we are unable to run scenarios. So thank you for voting. I'm now going to close this and I'm going to share the results with everybody. 6% in real time, 4% real time, 6% less than 1 day, so 10% less than 1 day. 59% do have capability, but it is time consuming. 31% don't run any at all. Kajetan, any feedback on this result?
Yes, I think, well, I'm surprised that 1/3 almost is unable to run scenarios, but I think that relates to the fact of not having, let's say, a kind of integrated system allowing to do that. And I fully agree that yes, it is time consuming. We, as I mentioned, have some kind of integration and we don't waste time really on consolidation of the data itself, but that allows us, to do, let's say, basic scenarios within less than a day. Anything else, a more complex project requires much more much more work and interaction with the business. So yes, it is time consuming, and yes, there is a potential for a great tool to simplify to help our work.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on there. So thank you very much for the insight. But yeah, 31% don't run it. It is, especially going through COVID and everything else that has been happening, you know, a lot of businesses have gone out of business because they haven't been able to react as quickly as they should have. So right now, good time to ask our panelists to join us for the next question. But before we do that, well, you can still join us, but let me just remind our audience, we've had 20 odd questions already, all very exciting. Please carry on sending your questions. We will answer some of them today. Those we don't or can't answer because of time, we will answer to you directly on your email. So please don't stop, carry on sending. Right, so the question is, of course, how long does it take to run a scenario within our panelist sort of organization? And if I can come to you, Anfisa, first.
Sure. It depends on the scenario. If it's a quick update for the running months or for the whole quarter or for the remaining half of the year, it could be anything between 3 days to 2 weeks. Depends on the length of the scenario refreshment.
Yeah, length and difficulty and etc. So great answer there. Thank you very much. Wojciech.
But on our side, scenario planning is inherent part of the forecasting process, and then we try to stay within the week time frame to to do the forecasting, align on the assumptions, define those ranges of the outcomes, those risks and opportunities. I would say it's a process that takes more or less up to 1 week. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Tuvi?
I'm going to give a very straightforward answer here. Very quickly, when you have an EPM tool, if the model is well built, it can be a matter of a few minutes. And I know that this is very different from working without, because you need to juggle with multiple versions, of your Excel file or this sort of things. And, it's also sometimes very prone to error. So you take time to double check things, to consolidate, and at the end, adding that all together makes the whole process very time consuming.
Absolutely, and you're going to share something with us, in your presentation. So real time is what we're talking here. At a touch of a button, you can run your different scenarios. Kajetan, would you like to sum up or anything you would like to add before we move to the next stage?
Yeah, I will just say, yes, we see even when we have a good culture, right, we are automated, we can do that relatively quickly. The challenge is for these more specific special projects, let's call it, not something out of the run rate, right? This is where you really need more time, more intelligence, and I guess kind of a well-built tool could be an added value here. And just a normal, let's say, ERP-based integration, which most of us have, at least to some extent in bigger corporations, well, deals with these basic cases and initial data, but doesn't do these next steps. And that's really where the bottleneck currently is.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Let us now turn our webcam and give way to Tuvi, who will take us through our last set of presentation. Of course, a reminder, Tuvi is head of strategic finance at Pigment, and today she will share with us how she uses processes and technology to help with both processes. So Tuvi, over to you whenever you're ready.
Thank you for the intro, Hans, and hi, everyone. Really great to be here today. And I'm really excited to talk about how important processes and technology come into play for rolling forecast and scenario planning. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm the head of strategic finance at Pigment. So we are a B2B SaaS company in the planning industry. We have a presence in EMEA and North America and have been around since 2019. And our role in strategic finance is to help the business grow as intelligently as we can. My team and I, we look after budgeting, forecasting, and revenue planning, as well as giving key actionable reporting to stakeholders to help them reach their targets in the long run. And at Pigment, when it comes to the planning and forecasting season, there are usually a few stakeholders involved in the process. So you can see on this slide, we have the finance team, then the sales and HR teams, and everyone else involved in operations. Finally, we have our executive bridging on the top. It means a lot of people around the table, right? And not only that, it also means you need to retrieve the right data, and you need to have one source of truth to align everyone. And of course, we need to master a few work streams in order to really get our planning and forecasting right. So we have what we call strategic planning, which is sort of a high level plan, acting as a guidance throughout the whole process. We have financial planning, which is quite common in the organization. And then with the sales team, we work together on revenue, go-to-market planning. We want to ensure we have the right strategy to drive our top line. And then lastly, we have the whole headcount and hiring analysis. And we do spend a lot of time there because we want to make sure that we have the right people in the right seat at the right time, because at the end of the day, people have a lot of impact on the organization. So I just gave you an overview of the different stakeholders my team and I are working with, and the different work streams that we currently have. And to stitch everything together, we have a clear processes, clear ownership for each of these work streams so that everyone is involved at every stage and shares the same amount of information. Now moving on to the next slide. The first milestone, somehow when everyone is brought back together is during the rolling forecast, which happens every quarter. So we have one meeting with the executives that we prepare with all the stakeholders. You have on the left-hand side, we go through the most recent picture of the business. And then we have another sort of follow-up session to present initiatives to potentially bridge that gap. And typically, the first thing we do when we come to this meeting is to make sure that we have the right data on our actuals and the right consolidated picture to visualize our landing. And with the technology platform, it really allows my team to enter those meetings with data that are already synchronized and available. So this brings much more collaboration and transparency to manage performance. Very important to add as well is that we're talking about business planning altogether. So meaning that with an integrated tool, we can easily connect our financial model to the revenue model, to the headcount model as well, and generally speaking, to any other models in real time. And that's very important for executives to have that real-time view to steer the business so they can easily identify all risk and opportunities at each level. Moving on to the next slide. And after those meetings, now that you have sort of identified what has been driving the performance, the risk and opportunities, and before jumping right into execution mode, we also look at scenario planning to effectively anticipate change and all the uncertainties when necessary. So we plan for a few scenarios, can be based on different market conditions or any sort of variables we really want to reflect and effectively visualize the impact directly on numbers. So let's say we want to see the implications of having a delay in our pipeline generation or headcount recruitment. So if you don't have the right people in seats at the right time, as mentioned before, they would start, for example, ramping up later than expected. So there might be a scenario where you're not making the sales target, which is quite difficult. And here comes the part where we add the most value in our role, which is, first, identifying the risk, and second, to be able to come up with solution. That's crucial and very important. And to illustrate that, I want to walk you through like an example of how business planning tool can be used in scenario analysis. And hopefully, let's go. It's going to be on the previous slide. Hopefully, this echoes to what we've been discussing earlier with Kahitan regarding the functionalities, and particularly look at those tools. So if we can just restart this slide, that would be great. Yes. So for example, I'm going to quickly create a new scenario and then play around with the different assumptions. For example, here. So what if I want to see, let's say, a reduction of 5% in the sales team, maybe 3% in marketing, and 2% in G&A. And what I want to see here as well is the impact from my base scenario. And you're going to see in a second a waterfall highlighting that. So I can easily see the elements that are bridging, my numbers. There you go. And now, let's say I really want to specifically change an assumption at a more granular level. I want to change that 5% that I initially applied to the sales, but I want to put it 2%, but only for revenue operations role. And I can also add a comment, maybe to my CEO, so she can see the adjustment that has been made. So it was, as you can see, I just post my comment. Overall, as you can see, it was very easy to navigate this application. I've changed a few assumptions. I was able to visualize the results and also add a few comments to stakeholders. So overall, very intuitive. And I want to show you now how we can extend the use case back to rolling forecast or live budget as we speak. So let's say we're early February, I'm changing the date so I have the right numbers so I can see my actuals in January, then my forecast number would come after that. I can see here the delta between my initial budget and my rolling forecast. I can either change directly an assumption or choose to split equally my numbers to close that gap with my budget. Or I can even choose a specific month to close that gap, which is what I'm doing right here by clicking on this button. And if I want to compare it to my initial budget in blue here, I can see now where my rolling revenue stands today. And of course, all of these, I can choose who can have access to that information, because sometimes, you want to build specific boards to specific stakeholders. So not everyone has access to that information. So there is a possibility to have those access control as well that can come very, very handy with the tool. So I've just shown you a few examples. So there are many, many more use cases that you can do with technology and especially an EPM tool. So to conclude this section, we've been talking a lot about the collaborative aspect of technology, where my team and I were really able to partner with cross-functional teams and share that one source of truth throughout the whole organization. We've also seen that in planning season, we can easily create scenarios, like literally on the spot, and have that agility to react fast to a changing environment, which is most of the case today. And all of these, from a real picture of where the business stands today, so which is quite powerful. And finally, all the processes in place coupled with technology help us focus on things that really move the needle and add value, for a finance team. That was it on my side. Thank you so much. Over to you, Hans.
Tuvi, thank you very much. Great presentation. And of course, now, our members could have seen through your presentation how a slick, integrated organization with an integrated modeling tool works to make all of that very, very quick, very easy, and very flexible for both rolling forecast, scenario planning, and everything else. So fantastic presentation there. Let us quickly listen to our members and see who is using any sort of this kind of technology. So how mature is your technology that underpins your forecasting process? We do not do any planning and forecasting, of course, is the first option. Second one is Excel. Third one is we have traditional planning tools. And the fourth one is cloud-based EPM platform, very similar to what Tuvi has just shown us. So first one is we do not do any planning. Second one is we use Excel. Third one is we have traditional planning tool, and fourth one is cloud-based EPM platform. If you can vote, please, we'll give it another few seconds. Thank you very much for voting. I'm going to close it and I'm going to share the results. 60% use Excel as expected, 31% use traditional planning tools, and 10% only use cloud-based EPM platform. Tuvi, any feedback on the outcome here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, generally speaking, there is a shift that is being made, recently, and especially, in our very fast-paced environment that we see today. And I think a lot of, from this result as well, I think a lot of organizations start to realize that, that technology can bring a lot of value and impact on the organization. But there's still, at the same time, a lot of enablement to be made in this field. But it's good to see overall that there is this movement. The movement is there, to sort of facilitate everything, empower finance team as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And of course, you see 31% there. Hopefully, those 31% are moving towards the cloud-based EPM platform. But pushing Excel, and this is where, there's not a lot of flexibility, not a lot of adaptability. So hopefully, there's quite a bit of opportunity on that side as well. So let us now ask our other panelists to join us, and then we can discuss technology. Please do so. Whilst I remind our members to keep sending their questions, please. We will answer a few after our session here, and then the rest we will answer very definitely via email. So what role does technology play in your forecasting and scenario planning processes? Would like to delve a little bit more and ask our panelists, how are they using technology? And Fisa, over to you.
So depending on which level of the business we are forecasting, it's a combination of the traditional Excel on top of the Excel, and a couple of planning tools. So cloud-based is yet to come to my business, but I know that in Honeywell, in other businesses, that is cloud-based technology already being used. It's a huge corporation, and the rollout plans are different business by business.
And to go back to your part of your presentation there, very definitely in part of the business there could be this application of the cloud-based EPM process as a cookie cutter, and then rolled out to the entire organization as well, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Wojciech, your answer, please.
Yeah, we use different applications. As you have seen in my presentation, we use Salesforce, which effectively is, I would say, it's a robust tool for planning process for sales organization and the orders and opportunities. So that's broadly renowned system. We also use system for projects, reporting, and also forecasting. Clearly, we are using Excel, for integrating many of the assumptions, and so not everything is integrated in one specific platform. But we try to use more and more modern tools, even if they are not always sitting in the same platform.
Yeah, great example there. Thank you very much. Kajetan?
I would say similar for us. We do use Oracle Cloud, let's say, to load our total income statement forecasts, and we do easy retrieves for actual and forecast, so that allows us for good comparability and maintenance of different scenarios. We go there, well, down to even region and customer really. So that's very helpful because you can quickly do some retrieves and comparisons. And then for more data, more details, well, it's either directly through ERP or we are pretty well interfaced through business objects, which is incredibly helpful with the flexibility of building different queries. But then, yes, it is still sits a little bit separate.
Brilliant. And Tuivi, any closing comments before we go to the key takeaway session?
No, again, I think it's very interesting to see this this shift. I mean, it's not we don't do finance as we do back at the times, but it's good to see that like one way or another we rely on technology somehow. Yes.
Fantastic. So please stay on the camera because we're now going to our key takeaway section, and then we will do our Q&A. So ladies and gentlemen, please keep sending your questions. We've got lots of questions and we've got an exciting Q&A session coming shortly as well. So in this section, what we aim to do is to come up with some conclusion from each presentations. One or two short conclusion from each one of you, please. Anfisa, if I may come to you, please.
Sure. So a combination of three factors, which is great teamwork and collaboration, technology, and adaptability, agility to reflect current business landscape, are the key factors for success. And this is ensured via rolling forecasts or combination of the traditional and rolling. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Wojciech, what will your conclusions be?
Let's say for me, the most important thing for everybody who wants to go on this journey of the rolling forecast and scenario planning is clearly answering the basic questions. What do we need out of that? How does it apply to my own business? And why is it better than what we are doing currently? And then, of course, it follows with the following questions. What technology do we use? How do we define the process? Where we take the data from, and how do we define the next step? But the fundamental questions are, first, from my perspective.
Brilliant, brilliant. Three different things there. Kaetan, what would your conclusion be?
So referring to my presentation, I would say really take time to understand key drivers of your business and to what extent you can control them. Be close to the business, collaborate, gain this knowledge, which allows you then for efficient assessment of scenarios. Getting this feeling when you look at it, if it can work or cannot, how realistic it is. That comes with more regular work, right, with your colleagues and time, but finally brings its fruits. So.
Fantastic, thank you. Tuvi.
Yes, so on the back of my presentation and with all the fantastic discussion that we've had, I think technology is something that can be helpful in a changing environment for sure. But most importantly, it's about fostering relationships and collaboration between teams that have the most impact, I would say.
Fantastic, great set of comments and conclusion there from our panelists. So panelists, thank you very much. Let us now move to our exciting Q&A session. We have lots and lots of questions here. Please come on the camera, everybody. We have lots and lots of questions, but time is short, so we will try and answer some of them. And we start by our first question to Anfisa. Anfisa, do you look at rolling forecast output and compare it to long-range planning, for example, and run scenarios to remain on track? How does that work within your sort of environment? I think you're on mute, Anfisa.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we look at the scenarios and the implication of the scenarios short-term to mid-term, and whether any additional corrections should be taken for the big significant forecast update. So it's constantly keeping the pulse on the development of the data and coordinating communication upwards, downwards, what needs to change in terms of supply chain planning, forecast of the production, resources, resource allocations, and yeah, it's a almost constant ongoing process.
Absolutely, and it's always a constant ongoing process, checking at, you know, what were the commitment to board and where are we against it, what we can do about it, etc. at the end of the day, but also a realistic view as to where the climate is going and everything else, I guess. So great answer there. Thank you very much. Next question is to Wojciech. Wojciech, how did finance, or how does finance decide key stakeholders for scenario planning? And how much time is needed from stakeholders to do scenario planning? I think there's a couple of questions in the question. Whether or not they're relevant, that's another thing.
Yeah, I'd say in our case, this kind of scenario planning is quite integrated in the process, as you know, as different management teams at a different level, they are, let's say, cooperating together on definition of those ranges of the outcomes. So it's, you know, someone from from sales and tendering, there's a person, of course, kind of general management, there's definitely a finance person, there is a person could be from production, could be from project execution. So it's always a group of the stakeholders which are part of that process, and of course, depending on the nature of the particular part of the business, I don't know, if manufacturing is involved, then of course these stakeholders will be different. I always see as, you know, as the forecast of scenario planning, not as the finance kind of ownership. Finance naturally kind of coordinates the process, but at the end of the day, it's business that owns the numbers, and finance is supporting that, and not just finance owns it. That's why it's very much natural that all these stakeholders are naturally involved and owning that process, or co-owning this process together.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the whole idea of an integrated sort of organization where, you know, it's not run by finance completely and everything done by finance. The stakeholder have a key input and controlling it as well. So thank you very much for that. We go to Kajetan now, and Kajetan, interesting question for you. Do you have formal or informal post-mortem on scenario planning? And do you see the better future planning as a result of the learnings from this post-mortem? How do you do that within your organization?
So we, yes, well, we do have, of course, so our main scenario is budget. So, and we normally continue to assess that, right, versus actual versus budget throughout the year, especially that this is a reference for different things Wojciech mentioned earlier, like bonuses and so on. So the analysis of that is really ongoing every month. We try to understand mix analysis of our products, where we differ on the costs, how our headcount is evolving versus the assumptions in which market we are growing, and so on. But we also do that for more special projects, making sure we really realize on the commitment we made to the senior leadership team. Imagine major projects like transfer of manufacturing from one location to the other. Yes, that's normally related with significant commitment on payback time and contribution to your bottom line. So we will for sure monitor the execution until the project is executed, and make sure we react in case this is not done. And I would say, especially for these out of the run rate things, yes, such a tool, if you could import this data there and somehow overlay in an easier way for comparisons and visualization, yes, I think there is a potential for a shorter and better, quicker and better insight into the execution. Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, great points there. Thank you very much. And our last question will, of course, go to Tuvi. And Tuvi, thank you for taking us through the tool that you used. How easy is it to overlay these sort of tools on top of your ERP? How long does it take? Any sort of idea you can share with the members?
Well, in terms of integrating, you mean integrating the different sources into this EPM tool? Yeah, no, usually what we see on the market is those tools are flexible also in terms of integration, meaning that there's a lot of features that have been developed to make sure that it answers the need to finance team, meaning that they want to have a holistic view of the business and all the data that flows into the same place. So meaning that it doesn't take much time to integrate, for example, a ERP to an EPM tool, or Salesforce, for example, to an EPM tool. So usually it's done very well. A lot of features around that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, panelists, we haven't got much more time to take more questions, but what we will do is we will send it to you directly and we will get them answered to our audiences and our members. So if you would like to just stay on the webcam, we've got a few closing slides just to take our members through what's next. What's next is leveraging predictive planning and forecasting. So more of AI and ML in forecasting, which is something I'm doing on the 28th. And then we have winning formula for FP&A storytelling. So please put that in your diary, 4th of April for that one. A lot of you have already participated to our previous FP&A trends survey, and we've shared a couple of insights in this webinar on the 22 one. So please, if you could participate, it only takes 10 to 12 minutes. Your insight is very, very much appreciated. Finally, it's a great time to say thank you to our technology partner, Pigment, today. A big, massive thank you to our panelists for all their hard work, their insight, their great presentation. And a big thank you to everybody who's attended our webinar today. Hope it's been very good for you. And this is how we can keep in touch. So please go ahead and do this. And let me just remind you, I am now about to close this and you'll get a feedback form come up. So please tell us, how we did, but also what would you like to listen from us in the near future. So ladies and gentlemen, with this concludes our webinar for today. I would like to say goodbye, good morning, good afternoon, good evening again, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.